So thanks for coming to talk. Lunch is coming up quite soon, so appreciate you being here. My name is Chris Doman. Some of you might know me from a project called OTX or another project called Threat Crowd. Most of you probably won't know me. I won't bother with the bio, but I'll just say that I got into the industry thanks to the cybersecurity challenge, who I saw. I've got a booth here, so anyone's looking to get into it, it's a pretty good start. So the talk today is on open source malware. I thought it would be a nice topic, given the overall B-sides theme is sharing is caring. So kind of a fit there, how that all fits together. And open source malware, obviously it's been, like any other software, it gets abused, so it's not unique. But at the same time, there are some trends here which seem to be growing in the last couple of years. So I'm going to talk about that through a couple of stories. And if you saw the previous talk, that's about how you should always talk through stories, so hopefully that'll be on point. So this is the first one. I forgot to turn it on. This is the first one, okay. Anyone want to guess what this media clip is about? No? So this is about the December 2015 attacks against some Ukrainian power stations. So at the time, it made quite a lot of news. About 250,000 people were left without power on Christmas Eve, so that kind of sucked. And the way the attackers did it was pretty interesting. They actually simply stole a bunch of credentials through quite a long campaign, and then they remotely connected in using stolen VPN credentials to some SCADA consoles, and then they just turned off some circuit breakers. I guess I'm making it sound easy. There's a whole other stuff behind that, but it was quite a damaging attack. And so this is TLP green. That just means don't stick this on the internet for this slide here. So it was an interesting attack, but quite a damaging one. And the way that these guys set up for the attack, it was kind of all about how these guys normally operate. So they're a pretty typical example of a kind of medium capability group. And that's where there's been quite a lot of growth recently, or at least a lot of coincidences, is people using some open source malware. So they've got some kind of funding or capability. They've got some of their own exploits. So up here you can see a couple of CVEs. One's for PowerPoint. They're delivering their malware called Black Angel with that. Another one there, it's for SCADA consoles, so they can remotely connect some General Electric stuff without authenticating. They've also got some of their own macro droppers, which are okay. And then the malware they use most of the time is called Black Energy. And Black Energy could fit in any of these categories, really. So originally, a few years ago, you could buy it for about $700, including the source code. It was used in some DDoS attacks against Georgia during a certain conflict. And then there was a second version that's a lot better. That was sold again. And then these guys have got their own custom version that's a little bit smaller. So they've got some kind of commercial stuff they use, some of their own stuff they use too. And then Kill Disk, they also wipe disks just to make things a little bit more difficult. So during the Ukraine attacks, they wiped a bunch of file shares, that kind of thing, reset passwords too, just to make sure the operators couldn't get things back up and running again. Also wiped a SCADA console in one case because it was running Windows XP. Yeah, and they use some commercial stuff, so like any good attacker, they'll go around the network using a bit of RDP and TeamViewer. On some networks, that will blend in. And then the reason I'm talking about them, obviously, is because it's used a lot of open source too. So they use whatever kind of tools they need for the job. So they've got Reader or Redo, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. That's for doing TCP over HTTP. So on a kind of tight firewall, they can still get a lot of traffic through. They've got a web shell they use, just ripped straight off of GitHub. They've got DropBear, which is an SSH server. And then they've got DSE Fix, which just lets them run unsigned drivers on Windows. So in this case, they're doing that for their main malware, which needs drivers. So these attacks weren't unprecedented. The DHS in the US, they warned about this particular group of attackers called Sandworm a couple of years ago when they saw them browsing around some stuff in the US. About 6 months before these attacks in 2015, on the night of the Ukrainian elections, they took out some of the TV stations, just to try and disrupt things a little bit. So interesting guys, and interesting that they're, on the one hand, pretty good, the other hand, they use whatever they need to pick up. So a couple of weeks later, in January, after these attacks and Christmas, they came back again. They're targeting a lot of the same people, some other people too. And ESET picked up these attacks. But this time, rather than using the Black Energy malware, which they've been using for the last couple of years, they're using GCAT, which is quite a nice backdoor off of GitHub. It uses Gmail for command and control. It's written in Python. It's a pretty solid piece of kit. And I guess the reason they used it was because they're so associated with this other piece of malware they thought they might want to change. They were still delivering it in the same way, though, so it's also kind of obvious who was doing it. And the guy that wrote this, I'm sure a lot of you will know, he does some great tools, but in this case, it looks like he's a bit upset that his tool was abused to take out some power stations as well, set up for later attacks. So this is a pretty extreme example. So be a bit careful about this slide. I made this before some of the recent events. This is the kind of thing that obviously can happen if you release your code to anyone to use. Obviously, you can't control who's going to be using your software at that point. So this guy's an idiot. He makes YouTube videos like you all have seen where you can use NJRAT and some other free tools to hack into people, except this guy tries to rely on himself on other organizations. And yeah, you can't really control who's going to be using your software once you give it away for free. Interestingly enough, he had this on YouTube at first, but they took it down straight away, and then Facebook, and they took it down straight away. But now it's been sitting on the Internet Archive for 2 years. And they're a really good charity that basically back up the internet, so they're very busy, they got a lot of abuse complaints. But if you try and control the information, it's obviously going to end up somewhere in this case, where someone didn't have the resources to take this down, even after they received abuse complaints. So the story continues. This group of attackers, they're called Sandworm, if I didn't mention them before. They were seen again, December again, this time last December. This time, though, they weren't using the open source backdoor GCAT. They're using something that was kind of inspired by it. So they've amended to use their own version, and now it uses Telegram instead for that command and control. So again, pretty hard to detect. They also upgraded some of the rest of their kit too, so they were using less of the open source stuff. Now they're using their own tool to kind of bounce through networks and get past firewalls. And that's something that's not all that uncommon. So there's a really interesting group of attackers called Turla. They were first seen in the 1990s, targeting the US government. And back then, their toolkit was just taken from Frac. So they just lifted source code from those kind of ASCII E-signs. I think Frac's still going. That was what their toolkit was in the 90s. Since then, they've built their own platform. They only use their own stuff now. Now they're very good. And there's a report out yesterday on how they're using Britney Spears' Instagram account. And they're leaving little messages on her account, and that's how they were doing their command and control these days. So blame Britney if you get hacked. They also upgraded their kill disk stuff. So now if they destroy your files, they also leave you this nice kind of ransomware-style message based off of Mr. Robot. And there wasn't so much detail on this, but apparently they've potentially been seen again this Christmas. The attacks weren't so bad, so maybe some lessons were learned. So Mirai, I think everyone here knows Mirai really well. Obviously, Internet of Things botnet affects things like webcams and routers all around the world. So the guy that wrote it, he took out Brian Krebs' website with a massive DDoS attack. I think some people said it was one of the biggest at the time. Some other stuff too. The problem with doing that is it obviously gets you quite a lot of attention, maybe more than he was expecting. So after that, he released the code open source for anyone to use, maybe to try and get the heat off his back. You can muddy the attribution and the water there by everyone running your code. And people not only ran their own botnets, because he gave a really nice user guide on how to set this up, they also improved it. They added some extra vulnerabilities in there. And TalkTalk, who are always obviously having some issues, they're one of the people who has a bunch of routers compromised, and these attacks obviously still going. Tons of WannaCry botnets out there. Interesting enough too, there's another worm that's kind of inspired by Mirai called Hajim, which, or Hajim, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. The semantic wrote up, and they took the way that Mirai worked, and they improved it. It's a far better written piece of kit. It's not written in Go, for one thing. And it goes around patching these vulnerabilities. Not that Go is not great. Just someone that was just smiling at me there. So this is the third story. I think this is probably the most interesting one in terms of all the ups and downs of it. And you might have heard of some bits of this story. It's about a piece of malware called Hidden Tear, which is some open source ransomware, which was released on GitHub a couple of years ago, now being seen in the wild quite a lot. But I haven't seen all the ups and downs covered in one single place yet, and there are a lot of them. So it's written by this guy. I think he pronounces his name Utku, but if anyone can correct me, please let me know. Or if he's here in the audience as well, let me know. Yeah, he's just a university student at the time. He was studying InfoSec. He thought he'd get his name out there by writing a piece of kit and giving it away for free, which is a fair enough thing to do. He's got a sense of humor. You can see he's talking about asking for cookies and kebabs as part of the ransomware note, which is kind of funny. And the original version doesn't actually encrypt all your files either. You have to change something to get it working. So he said he wrote this as an educational tool. So vendors, I guess people like me, could learn how to detect ransomware better. We already have enough ransomware samples. We probably don't need the open source stuff, but I mean, that's why I say he did it. I saw an interview with him where he was happy to talk about it. And he said, actually, he wrote it to impress a girl, which maybe is another reason why you want to write some open source ransomware. Apparently it didn't work, though, he said. But the second version of this, so he tried again, was called Ida, named after the girl he liked. So I don't know, maybe keep trying. But yeah, I think I hope it works out for him, though. But yeah, I guess that's another reason. And the final reason was that he also said maybe it was kind of a honeypot. So the idea is that he wrote this potentially bad piece of code with some crypto flaws in there so people could get their files back after they were ransomware encrypted. So maybe that's a valid reason. And it got quite a lot of attention. So it was picked up on Reddit quite fast, people talking about it. One guy suggested maybe he should add a backdoor, which is what this fork suggested. He rejected that one at that time. And he also pointed out some of those crypto flaws. So he's using a 32-bit integer to generate a random key from. That means, correct me if I'm wrong, I think about 2 billion values. So in a modern computer, depending on how it's done, that could be brute forceable. Also based on the system time of when this thing's run. So potentially you might think about some issues there. So yeah, this is the first time it's seen the wild, I think. I think it was Trend Micro picked this up. If you visited a website in Paraguay, downloaded the Flash update, whatever it was, this would be on your computer screen. It's saw this, and he said, actually, I might be able to get these people's files back if I can get a copy of the malware. And people did send him a copy of the malware, and he did indeed break his own crypto, perhaps using some of the suggestions that other people had given him on Reddit. So the way he did it was he looks at some of the first files that were encrypted, and the base of that you get the system time, and then the system time isn't be exactly the kind of the password that was used to encrypt those files with, but it's more or less about that time. So then he brute forces either side of that time. You can see here about 45,000 goes it took him to get that, which is obviously pretty quick to guess. So he did manage to get people's files back, so some kudos there. This was actually inspired by Bitdefender, who cracked another piece of ransomware called Linux Encoder using the same mechanism. They made the same kind of mistakes there. But in the case of Linux Encoder, the crypto is so bad, the bad guys accidentally encrypt your files multiple times in multiple rounds. It just keeps on running. Yeah. So you can't get your files back, even if you either crack the code because it's gone, or if you pay them, you still don't get your files back. So that kind of sucks. So yeah, this is EDA 2, the improved version he wrote, named after someone. And gone are most of those crypto implementation flaws. So he'd taken some advice and improved it. This obviously is a little bit dodgy depending on the reasons why you're writing a piece of code like this. Again, it didn't take long before this was seen in the wild. So let's say you want to play Far Cry, and I can see why you might. It looks quite fun. There's a guy with antlers and all that kind of thing. I haven't played it, but it does look good now. But it's going to cost you £39 and 99 pence to buy it on Steam. And that's when I checked a couple of days ago. There's quite a lot of money. So the obvious thing you can do is you're going to Google for a crack. You find this video of these two lovely people who are going to give you that crack. So you can play Far Cry for free, which is just great. Google always makes sure that YouTube ranks well, hence why this stuff ends up there. Well, oh no, they don't give you the crack for Far Cry. Of course, this is an EDA 2 variant of ransomware, which infected a ton of people. And the message you get when you're infected with this is pretty annoying. This guy said, "You'll never be able to find me. Police will never find me." And then he equates the kind of crypto abilities of Best Buy with the NSA, pretty much say, neither of those guys can get your files back, you're all screwed. So coup to the rescue again. He actually did manage to get people's files back. This time he'd taken the advice of those people on Reddit and he added a backdoor. So even though the crypto had been fixed, you could log into the command and control server, pick up those keys, and then give them back to everyone. So this was shared on the Bleeping Computer forums. Incidentally, I got a couple of screenshots from them, so thanks to Bleeping Computer. So that was nice of him. Although I think in the UK, actually, the Computer Misuse Act might not let you hack into the bad guys, but I don't know. Obviously, it didn't take long before other people forked his code on GitHub. That's what you do if your code's on GitHub. You fork it and you improve it. So this guy here, he thought that he was a bit embarrassed by all of its bad code. He improved it. He fixed a lot of those mistakes he'd left in there. And the reason that he made it was to help law enforcement understand what ransomwares work like. So if anyone here is from law enforcement, you can thank this guy whose handle is Ampinel for giving away this more improved ransomware that doesn't have these flaws in. Interestingly enough, though, he missed the backdoor, even though everyone was talking about it at the time. Someone else pointed out to him, and he removed the backdoor. So you can no longer log in and get the keys back. Obviously, it didn't take long before this was seen in the wild. So let's say you want to play Minecraft. It looks like a really fun game. Here's a loader. You can get cracked. Very nice. But oh no, it installs this malware. So this is ransomware based off of Stolik, which is itself a variant of EDA 2, which itself is improved version of hidden tear. So I think this is laughing my arse off at use, or the Malware. Either way, it's, yeah, I'm not sure. Either way, it's another piece of really annoying malware. I think that pretty much last week, Stolik was taken down off of GitHub. I think that the guy that wrote it maybe had a change of heart, having seen it used in the wild. But again, it's still on GitHub, though, because obviously people have forked it and either made identical copies or they've improved it. So up there's a GitHub repo where you can still get it from. I was also surprised when I was looking into this and who wrote this. I found some video interviews with the author. It turns out he's a 13-year-old Bitcoin developer from India. So at that point, my view of him changed a little bit. I mean, I think maybe releasing open source ransomware, I don't think it's a great idea. I wouldn't do it, but at the same time, I'm sure a lot of us have done dumb stuff when we were 13. Talking of which, that line at the bottom, that's me when I was his age. I wrote a Unix password cracker in Perl, which kind of shows my age. That's the disclaimer on there. It's terrible, though. If you try and run it, I think it cracks like 1 password a second. So no one's going to use it. But you know, the point here is that all this stupid stuff I did when I was 17, that's still out there. Well, 17 years ago when I was 13, it's still out there. Once something's out there, you can't put the genie back in the bag. This happened yesterday, so I feel bad for this kid, but good for me because it's quite topical for the talk. A 14-year-old was arrested in Japan for writing some ransomware and then making it available online. And when I was reading the article, a couple of things stood out. For one thing, this is apparently Japan's first arrest of someone that wrote ransomware. Also, this kid didn't actually deploy it in the wild. It says that this guy didn't actually infect anyone. He just gave away the code. And says 100 people downloaded it. So I feel a bit bad for this guy. Again, I think it probably wasn't a great idea for him to write this ransomware and make it available, but you know, it looks like he didn't infect anyone. So this is another EDA2 variant. So it's cool, the guy I was showing earlier, this was his second one to impress that girl. So yeah, someone made another variant of this used in the wild called Magic, another annoying ransomware note. But this time, the story took a bit of a turn for the worse. So the good guys took down the server from which all these keys were being backed up from, and also where all the ransomware was being served from. And that's a great thing, because it was stopping additional infections. It was stopping the bad guy being able to make some more money. The problem with that is, though, at that point, he can't log in and then download all those old keys. I mean, they're just not available online anymore. He can't just hack in and get people's data back. So that sucked. And then people were pretty upset about this. There was a guy posted on Bleeping Computer saying, hey, I lost all these photos of my kids. Can anyone help me? And they're saying, no, I'm sorry, but I mean, all those photos backed up 10 years. You should have backed them up. But the ransomware author, actually, of this Magic variant, actually went on the forum and said, I have made a backup of these keys. I can probably get your files back. But he had a condition. And that condition was that Utku had to take down both the EDA2 and the hidden tear source code. So he was kind of blackmailing him. He also asked some money too. And if you look at the discussion, it gets pretty aggressive. There's a political dimension to it. Utku's Turkish. This guy, the ransomware author, is Russian. They didn't get along very well, to say the least. But he did agree in the end because he wanted those guys to get their files back. So Utku did take down hidden tear and EDA2, and the original repositories now just show this. So a disclaimer and the logo. He recently upgraded the logo for EDA2, though, so I guess the branding's still going there. And he wrote a blog about his whole experiences and the whole ups and downs of this, saying that, I'm sorry I failed this time. It's pretty much how he signs it off. I did actually contact him as well. He read my message but didn't get back to me. But he's spoken about a couple of these things, though not all the bits, at conferences himself. So I'm guessing he's happy to share his stories about all the ups and downs here. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, though, once your code is out there, it's out there. You can't get that back in the bottle. So there are all these different forks here. So you can see here, there's a ton of hidden tear variants, just identical clones up on GitHub. You can also see here there are some improved versions as well. Someone's ported hidden tear to C++, which I think is really weird because the original hidden tear is a couple of hundred lines of VBScript.NET code. It's not very good. If you can write C++, you can probably write your own ransomware. Yeah, there are ports, improvements. The main version doesn't encrypt all your files by default. These versions do. So yeah, it's all there. And I mean, it's backed up in the commit histories too, so the code's all out there. And now everyone is seeing this in the wild. So I picked these screenshots up really quickly. So credits to a couple of people at the end, also for instance sandbox reports I ran through. So you can see here, That is Santa Claus smoking a joint who has encrypted your computer. Not a very nice man. He's on the naughty list. There's Pikachu ransomware. This, this one tells you not to download random shit off the internet. And given that you've just been infected, you probably know that now anyway. There's loads. Here's some more variants. I could have put down hundreds of pictures, but there wouldn't have been space. That one's Mr. Robot picture. Yeah, this one's great. This one says that it's not Microsoft Windows support. Then later says it is Microsoft Windows support. You've been infected with the Zeus virus. Please call us. So this is actually a bunch of tech support scammers who normally, where they phone up people and try and get them to phone them back and take control of the computer, or they just flash up those banner ads saying you're infected, now moving to use hidden tear. See, all these variants, by the way, the reason I'm showing this is because they're all either hidden tear or either 2 variants. That phone number no longer works, though. This one does. So I found a later version. So if anyone wants to call them, you probably want to check how much it costs to phone that. But there you go. I mean, most of these slides will be available online later. This one looks terrible, but it plays the Harry Potter theme tune, which is kind of cool when you're infected. Again, credit to Bleeping Computer for this one. This one you can't really see on the screen. It just deletes all your files. It's still based on the ransomware hidden tear, but it just dumps the key, doesn't even send it off. So there's no way of getting your files back. Someone's just not very nice. This one looks a little bit more familiar, maybe. Anyone recognize what this kind of looks like? Yeah. So these guys are impersonating WannaCry. It came out at the same time. It's like those insects that try and copy other insects to, look more dangerous or whatever. I don't know how successful it was, but I think they call it dark cry. This one got a lot of attention, so a few of you might have seen this one, ransomware. This is based on, I think it's hidden tear rather than either 2. So to get your files back, you have to play this anime game and get to an insanely high level before they'll give you your files back, which is just brilliant. So if you look at the thing here, you have to get 0.2 billion score, which sounds quite high, on lunatic level. So that's pretty tough. The guy that wrote this felt kind of bad about it. He released a crack which would sit in memory and then trick this into thinking you've got to 0.2 billion on lunatic level, so you can get your files back. This one doesn't actually ask for money. It's kind of nice, I guess. It gives you the key phrase back straight away. So the idea here is it's trying to educate about ransomware by infecting you with ransomware. This one's probably the scariest one. This is ransomware as a service. So for $175, you can buy this hidden tear variant, and they'll set up the service for you. They'll set up the affiliate scheme for you. They'll set up all this kind of infrastructure, that kind of thing. So you don't really need to know much at all to be running this. And $175 is really cheap to be buying into the low-end criminal game. And this is another one of those kind of growth areas where there's a lot of this, this open source stuff seems to be being used now. And that's scary, because once you've made $175, so it's maybe your first victim that you've infected, I mean, you've made your money back. You can reinvest. So you can buy time on an exploit kit or, improve other stuff. So yeah, that's probably why we're seeing a lot more variants like this. This is a really good map of ransomware families, semi-prominent ones by F-Secure. This is over time, so it's going forwards or grouped by month. So I was going to show a little icon for every hidden tear and either 2 variant, but it was taking a really long time. So if you just take my word for it, when I was looking through the first couple of months, it was a bit under 1 in 5 seemed to be based on these, so quite a lot. But this obviously does not take into account just what the distribution is. So the Locky, that really big piece of ransomware everyone was seeing was being distributed in the same way as Drydex. That would have infected millions of people, whereas some of these will only infected a few people. These are numbers from Trend Micro. They've been looking at hidden tear quite a bit. So over a month, this is how many different families they've seen. And it's in .NET. Obviously, the source goes online. It's pretty easy to fork. So this only goes up to March. But I was looking in May, and I'm pretty sure that number would have jumped up quite a bit. This has been a growing problem. It's not going back down. I'm not sure why there's that drop over Christmas, but I guess ransomware developers maybe take some time off. So I always like reading these messages about what are the kind of caveats on those GitHub repos about how you shouldn't use it. So hidden tear says this may only be used for educational purposes. Obviously, that's not what happened. And I have no legal background, but as far as I'm aware, that means nothing putting that on your repository, saying, please don't be evil with this. It probably just means you know you're doing something a little bit sketchy, maybe, and you're kind of hoping that nothing will happen. I know that because that's what I used to disclaim on source code that I published when I was a teenager, password crackers. I mean, a password cracker is not as bad as ransomware, but I still felt a little bit worried about it, so I'd stick this on it. Open source license, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm told by people far smarter than me that you're not allowed to dictate usage with the standard open source licenses. So you can't, as part of that license, say, this cannot be used for evil. That is not allowed in the way that that license works. Not that it would be enforceable anyway. And then Wassenaar, or Wassenaar, I don't know how to pronounce that, but that arms treaty that covers some cyber stuff, obviously in the news quite a lot. Again, I don't really know it, but people smarter than me are arresting stuff saying that it does not apply to open source explicitly in the definitions there. But until you publish the code, apparently it can. So just to end a bit on hidden tear and the open source ransomware, this is a poll by TwoSec, probably now best known as MalwareTech's best mate. So he asked, do you think, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit here, do you think that GitHub should be hosting open source ransomware? So for those that have got some energy, do you mind putting your hand up if you think GitHub should not host open source ransomware? A couple people. And hand up if you think GitHub should be allowed to. So I think here it's about 75% people think that GitHub should be hosting GitHub open source ransomware, that kind of thing. I'm kind of in the middle. I mean, despite actually doing a talk on this, I don't really know myself. My views bounce around between the both of them. So this last section is on leaked source code. So technically, leaked source code, stuff that's been stolen and stuck on GitHub or wherever, is not open source. But I thought I'd talk about it because it's quite topical. And also because if you're an attacker and you're going to be using some code, you don't really care about the license. If someone hasn't given you permission to use this backdoor against someone, I mean, you're hacking them anyway, you're not going to care about the licensing. So obviously shadow brokers is a rather famous example. It's allegedly a bunch of stuff in the NSA, entire platforms, exploits, documentation, many, many millions of pounds worth of stuff was published here. It was allegedly done by some Russian hackers. And yeah, there's loads of stuff here. But when it's first copied over onto GitHub, it was taken down. And it wasn't taken down because of the exploits. It was because they had an auction message on there from the shadow brokers asking for Bitcoin donations. And you're not allowed to solicit for money for stolen stuff on GitHub. That is against the rules. So they've actually got a really hard job, I feel, for GitHub. I'm not criticizing them. They've got to choose the line somewhere, and that's where they draw it. You also can't host compiled malware. So you can't just stick like njrat.exe on a GitHub repo and let people download it. That's not OK. But you can host scripts which can be executed as is. So when I used to do incident response, I remember there's one job where the attackers kept pulling stuff straight off GitHub, PowerShell scripts from PowerSploit, and executing it in one really leak command line thing. So download and execute straight off GitHub. And on the network level, that was actually pretty tricky to detect because we're just seeing, without SSL termination, a connection to GitHub. On the host, though, it's not that hard, thankfully. And other stuff, too. So someone uploaded a list of vulnerable websites. That was taken down from GitHub. Then they changed their mind and put it back up again. So they've got a hard choice. You're not allowed to use GitHub for command and control. That is against the rules, too. So you can't be putting messages on here and then infecting people via it. So there's a group of attackers that were doing that. But a lot of people have. But one of them had a part-time job as a pig farmer. And Trend did this really nice piece. They looked into him, and his profile picture on some forums is him in bed with a pig. I have that photo in the deleted slide selection, so if I finish early, I can show that if anyone wants to see a very good, actually, attacker that likes pigs. So WannaCry is obviously very topical, so I had to find some kind of way of sneaking this into the talk. Thankfully, there was a pretty good way. So if you're doing like a drinking game with buzzwords, this would be a good one to drink to. So the shadow brokers exploits, one of which obviously Eternal Blue is used in WannaCry to spread around SMBv1 connections. That came out in April, though there were some heads up as we coming out before that. But WannaCry obviously didn't come out till about another month. And BAE did a really good analysis. I don't think enough people read it, so if you haven't read it, it's really worth checking out. And they showed that it wasn't the original vanilla shadow brokers exploit that they were using, just straight taken. They were using a far easier to use, more packaged up version that was published open source onto GitHub just before WannaCry came out. So they took advantage of the fact someone packaged it up nicely. They also put into Metasploit as well as part of this process. So I don't know, maybe they would have made the worm anyway. Maybe it's taken a bit longer. At some point, this is going to happen. Obviously, if you have a really good exploit, it's going to end up nice to use in Metasploit. So I saw the original author of Metasploit talking about how he was very happy that in one case there was an exploit seen in the wild, and the very same day they managed to get into Metasploit, and that was just working out how fast the community could do to get these tools out there. And I think Metasploit overall is a very good thing. I think the kind of debates people maybe were having years ago is gone. People all agree that it makes the job easier. But in the case of having the exploits in there that quick, I'm not sure it necessarily helps on the defensive side. I think Moore was saying that it was great because vendors could test their detections by having it in Metasploit, but as a security vendor, we already have pretty good access to most exploits. There are obviously those programs where the stuff gets shared, ideally as quickly as possible. So I'm not complaining, but I'm not saying that it helps the defensive either. So it's always nice to see what goes around comes around. So if the shadow brokers, the guys leaking those NSA exploits, can be anyone, it's probably these guys, Fancy Bear, also known as APT28 of Sofiki. They're really pushed. So these guys are hacking to tens of thousands of people. They're the ones that hit the DNC in the US elections, and then more recently, the French elections. They've been targeting NATO for 10 years. And they're hitting more and more people every year. They are good, but they're also another example of one of those kind of medium capability groups that needs to do whatever they can. So yeah, these guys make a ton of mistakes. In this case, they left open their command and control server. Anyone can pick up the server side of their malware. So I think the domain, if I remember, it was transitionmail.com. I think it was hosted on at first, and people were looking for a long time. Also on the kind of defensive side of sharing is caring, Google wrote a paper on this piece of malware. It was being shared around people for a long time, but it was at TLP Amber, which means it shouldn't be on the internet, for example. In the end, a journalist published it, and then that probably means that Google aren't going to be so willing to share information on these kind of attacks around the industry so much when that happens. So that's the other side of sharing is caring. There's a whole debate, obviously, on the defensive side. How much should information be shared, and how do you control that? And the company that I work for, we're trying to improve how we do that a lot because, yeah, I won't go into my work, but yeah, it's a hard problem. So Hacking Team, again, I think everyone here has heard of Hacking Team. They are a somewhat controversial company. They sell surveillance software. So some of the stuff they do is they sell this kind of kit to law enforcement to do counterterrorism, which I think most people say is quite good. They also sell this kind of kit to dictatorships to hack into their political opponents and journalists, which some people say is bad. So someone got rather upset about this, and they stole their stuff and they stuck it on GitHub. So you can now download this straight off. I think I'm doing okay for time so far. So yeah, anyone can get this now. And this is an entire platform as well. So again, massive leak. Part of this too were exploits as well. So as part of this dump, there are 2 exploits in particular that were shared. And ShadowServer did a really nice analysis of how these were shared between different groups of attackers. So if you look at Chinese kind of targeted attacks, it looks like there's one central development shop, which then shares the code they build with other people. So this central development shop, quartermaster, as some people call them, they were building these exploits, make them easier to use, then hand them off to the other related groups. When I was at PwC, we're seeing similar stuff with a web exploit kit framework called Scanbox. We're seeing the guys that hit the Office of Personnel Management in the US and all those healthcare companies, they were using some of this kit. And then there were some people just hitting Tibet, they were using it. Again, one central place, and that's how that code gets shared. So Carburp, I think I'm getting towards the end now. It's nice to finish off some criminal stuff. So this guy's having a really bad day. He's one of the guys who was leading Carburp, which is a piece of banking malware, which was really big and popular a few years ago. They made many, many millions of pounds. Eventually, they were arrested. They made the mistake of targeting Russian banks, even though the ringleaders were based in Moscow. So, yeah, not a good idea. Again, at this time, I can show the video. It basically shows this guy in his pants being arrested by the FSB, not very happy. Yeah, and it was built by about 20, 25 people working mostly remotely, paid a couple of grand each to build extensions to, say, web inject this particular bank, infect NatWest or whatever, customers, that kind of thing. Altogether, a decent, serious piece of kit. And after these guys got arrested, the code got leaked. And the way it got leaked was the same as Zeus. If you've seen the Zeus banking malware, how that code got out. When they were arrested, people started selling it. They still had access to the code, initially for $40,000, which is a pretty good deal for this quite serious bit of kit. Then it dropped and dropped and dropped as more and more people shared it. Eventually, it's freely available. And now anyone can use it. Everyone is using it. So obviously, there's tons of banking malware that still uses Carburp, also still uses Zeus, given that code's leaked too. Suffolky or Fancy Bear, I mentioned a minute ago, those kind of Russian dudes, they're using their code. And why not? They haven't got time to write all their own software all the time and every different variation when stuff gets picked up. Another big leak that came out recently was Vault 7 by WikiLeaks. Allegedly, that's the CIA's toolkit now. So all these kits are out there. And again, that involved entire platforms and all this stuff. And apparently, they were using Carburp. So they were saving taxpayer money by reusing some publicly available code, which is great. They're not using all the code, just some bits. And they carefully vetted it for vulnerabilities, which is quite a good idea when it's just a bunch of guys working remotely for $2,000 building this stuff. So just to end this off on a more positive note, is there an upside to all this kind of reuse of malware and stuff being open sourced? We're just coming back to hidden tear. I thought this quote was quite nice off Twitter. So the Zeus banking malware that's available now everywhere, so much malware is based off of Zeus that people don't want to buy that anymore because it gets detected quite easily by, in particular, AV vendors. For one thing, there's a mutex, which most of those variations share. People still pick that up. There are tons of other abilities. People are good at picking up Zeus variants. The same with hidden tear. So it's not a hard piece of malware to pick up. Even ransomware generically can be detected quite easily. You can pack it and obfuscate it, but still not that easy. So it turns out Carburp does have a backdoor. Well, it's got vulnerabilities. It's got tons of them, actually. If you ever take a look at the server-side code, it's horrible PHP. There's loads of unchecked stuff going on. And it didn't take long before, I think this was Xylitol and a guy from Cylance. They found some backdoors. And then what they did, well, vulnerabilities, what they did was they went around attacking Carburp servers. And here's some stuff they found and some of the bad guys' stuff. So here's a bunch of victim data. Here's some telemetry around the world of the victims connecting to one server. They also found all the stuff you expect, so signed forms from banks, that kind of thing. Loads of stuff that they picked up there. And I was looking at NJRAT. The source code there looks pretty bad. So if anyone wants to attack another piece of open source things, no one's found a vulnerability there yet, but someone better than me. I'm terrible at exploit dev, but someone good could probably find some stuff there. So finally, I just want to thank all the people whose slides, well, screenshots I nicked that weren't just from sandbox reports, in particular to these people. And if I missed anyone off, I'm sorry about that. So that's it for me. If there are any questions, then it'd be great to answer them.